"Ma'am, step out of the vehicle now." The words cut through the quiet hum of the gas station like a switch being flipped, and for a second, even the buzzing neon sign above pump number 4 seemed to hesitate before flickering again. Danielle Carter didn't move right away, her hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, as if she were listening to something deeper than the command itself, something beneath the surface of the moment, something timing everything down to the breath. The air smelled faintly of gasoline and hot asphalt, still holding onto the day's heat, and somewhere across the lot, a car engine idled too long, too steady, like it was waiting. Red and blue lights washed over the side of her dark sedan, painting the metal and pulses, stretching shadows across the concrete. Officer Ryan Blake stepped closer, one hand resting near his belt, posture stiff with authority that didn't ask questions, only expected answers, while Officer Kevin Doyle lingered a few feet behind, scanning, watching, already convinced of something he couldn't quite explain. Danielle's gaze shifted just slightly, not toward the officers, but past them, toward the far pump where a gray pickup truck sat angled just a little too perfectly, its driver's silhouette barely visible through tinted glass, unmoving. Her pulse stayed steady, controlled, practiced, but there was a tension in the air now, thin as a wire pulled tight between seconds. She exhaled slowly, then turned her head toward the flashing lights without hurry, her expression calm, almost detached, like someone who had already calculated the outcome of every possible move. Ryan tapped the roof of her car, sharper this time, louder, the sound echoing across the empty lot as if to remind her, and everyone else, that he was in control here. "I said step out," he repeated, voice edged with impatience. Danielle finally reached for the door handle, but even that small motion carried a weight, deliberate, measured, as if each second mattered more than it appeared. The door opened with a soft click, the night air slipping in, cooler now, brushing against her skin. She stepped out slowly, hands visible, posture relaxed but precise, her eyes flicking once more, just once, toward the gray pickup. It hadn't moved. Not yet, but something about it felt wrong, like a story that hadn't revealed its ending. Kevin shifted his stance, glancing between Danielle and the car, but he didn't see what she saw, didn't feel the subtle imbalance in the scene. To him, this was routine, another stop, another assumption already forming. To Danielle, this was something else entirely, something fragile, something on the edge of slipping out of control. Ryan circled slightly, positioning himself where he could see both her and the vehicle behind, unaware that he had just stepped directly into the center of something far bigger than a routine stop. The neon sign buzzed again, louder this time, casting a cold, uneven light across all three of them. And for a brief moment, everything felt suspended, like the world itself was holding its breath, waiting to see who would make the next move and what it would cost. Danielle stood beside the open car door with the quiet composure of someone who had long ago learned how to exist in spaces where she was not expected to belong. Her shoulders relaxed, her breathing even, but her mind moving quickly beneath the surface, tracking details, measuring distance, calculating timing. The hum of the overhead lights blended with the distant sound of tires passing on the highway a quarter-mile away, a constant reminder that the world kept moving even when moments like this tried to hold it still. Officer Ryan Blake took a step closer, his boots scraping lightly against the concrete, his presence filling the small space between them as if proximity alone could establish control, while Officer Kevin Doyle angled himself slightly to the side, positioning for visibility, his eyes scanning Danielle with a mixture of curiosity and quiet suspicion that had already settled into certainty. "License and registration," Ryan said, his tone flat, practiced, but edged, with something sharper beneath, something that did not wait for answers so much as expect compliance. Danielle nodded once, slowly, and turned just enough to reach into the car, her movements deliberate, careful, every motion chosen not only for what it did but for how it would be perceived. Her fingers brushed against the edge of her wallet, but her attention flickered again toward the gray pickup across the lot, its engine still idling, a low, steady vibration that seemed louder now in the stretched silence, the silhouette inside remaining still, too still, as if watching without wanting to be seen. She pulled her license free and handed it over without a word. her eyes returning to Ryan, steady, unflinching, not confrontational, but not yielding either, the kind of gaze that unsettled people who expected immediate deference. Kevin let out a small breath, almost a quiet chuckle, as if the situation had already resolved itself in his mind, and he shifted his weight, glancing briefly toward the pickup, but dismissing it just as quickly, unaware of the thin line that connected everything unfolding in this moment. Ryan studied the license longer than necessary, his brow tightening slightly, as if searching for something that would confirm the narrative he had already decided on, the flashing lights reflecting off the plastic surface in pulses that made it difficult to read but easy to judge. "Where are you coming from tonight?" he asked, his voice carrying that same controlled pressure, the kind designed to make silence feel like resistance. Danielle's answer came calm, measured. "From work," she said, nothing more, nothing less, her tone offering no extra detail, no invitation for interpretation. The air seemed to shift again, subtle but real, as if something unseen had moved just out of alignment. Across the lot, the gray pickup's headlights flickered once, a barely noticeable change that most would miss, but Danielle did not, her focus sharpening for just a fraction of a second before settling back into stillness. Ryan handed the license to Kevin, who glanced at it quickly, then back at Danielle, his expression tightening just enough to suggest that whatever he saw did not match what he expected, and that alone was enough to keep the tension alive. "You in a hurry tonight?" Kevin asked, his tone lighter but no less probing, like someone testing the edges of a situation he thought he understood. Danielle shook her head slightly. "No, sir," she replied, her voice even, respectful, but grounded in something stronger than compliance, something that did not bend under pressure. A car passed on the road nearby, its headlights sweeping briefly across the gas station lot, illuminating the gray pickup for a split second, revealing the outline of a driver leaning forward, hands on the wheel, waiting. Then darkness returned just as quickly. Ryan followed the motion instinctively, his gaze shifting toward the vehicle, but only for a moment, not long enough to register what mattered, not long enough to see the pattern forming. Danielle saw it all, every small change, every shift in timing, and beneath her calm exterior, a quiet urgency began to build, not panic, not fear, but the awareness that something important was about to move, and that the seconds being spent here, under these lights, under these assumptions, were beginning to cost more than anyone standing in this moment. Realized, Ryan Blake did not notice the pattern forming, but he felt something he could not name, a subtle irritation that made him straighten his posture and tighten his grip on control, as if the situation itself was slipping just beyond his reach. He took a half step closer to Danielle, closing the distance in a way that was not necessary, his shadow stretching across the pavement under the harsh white lights. "Step over here," he said, gesturing toward the front of the patrol car, his tone no longer neutral but edged with quiet authority that expected immediate compliance. Danielle paused for the smallest fraction of a second, not hesitation but calculation, her eyes flicking once more toward the gray pickup, where the silhouette inside shifted slightly, a barely perceptible movement that changed everything. And then she moved, calm and composed, stepping where he indicated, her shoes making soft contact with the concrete, steady, measured, controlled. Kevin Doyle followed a few paces behind, his attention divided now, part of him still locked onto Danielle, part of him drifting back toward the pickup as if something in the air had begun to pull at his instincts, even if he did not fully understand why. "You mind telling me what you do for work?" Ryan asked, his voice carrying that same quiet pressure, the kind that tried to fill silence before it could become something else. Danielle met his gaze evenly, her expression unreadable. "Consulting," she said, the word simple, unadorned, offering just enough to satisfy the question, but nothing more, her tone steady, her posture unchanged. Ryan let out a short breath, not quite a laugh, not quite approval, more like dismissal, as if the answer confirmed something he had already decided. "Consulting," he repeated under his breath, glancing briefly at Kevin, who gave a slight shrug in return. The neon sign above flickered again, casting uneven light across their faces, turning shadows into sharp lines, and then softening them again in a rhythm that felt almost deliberate. Across the lot, The gray pickup's engine tone shifted just slightly, a low hum rising and falling as if the driver had adjusted pressure on the pedal, testing, preparing, waiting. Danielle heard it, felt it, her focus sharpening even as her body remained still, her hands relaxed at her sides, her breathing even, controlled, practiced. "Pop the trunk for me," Ryan said suddenly, his voice firmer now, less of a request, more of a directive, the kind that carried weight simply because it was spoken with certainty. Kevin stepped closer, positioning himself just behind Danielle's right shoulder, not touching, not restraining, but close enough to limit space, to suggest that movement in any direction would be noticed. Danielle nodded once, slowly, then reached into her pocket for her keys, the metal glinting briefly under the light as she pressed the button, the soft click of the trunk unlocking echoing faintly in the quiet. For a moment, no one moved, the trunk still closed, the air holding steady, stretched thin between action and consequence. Then, from across the lot, the gray pickup rolled forward a few inches, barely noticeable, but enough to shift the balance of the scene, enough to turn. Wading into motion, Kevin's head turned instinctively this time, his eyes narrowing slightly as he caught the movement. "You see that?" he muttered, under his breath, not fully committing to concern but no longer dismissing it either. Ryan glanced over, just for a second, his attention divided now, pulled between the routine he thought he controlled and the unfamiliar variable beginning to move at the edge of his awareness. Danielle saw the change in both of them, saw the hesitation forming, the uncertainty creeping in, and beneath her calm exterior, the urgency sharpened, pressing closer to the surface, because she knew what they did not. That the moment they were standing in was no longer just a stop, no longer just an assumption, but the fragile edge of something far more significant, something that would not wait for them to understand it before it unfolded. Ryan's attention snapped back from the slight movement of the gray pickup, but the moment had already fractured his certainty, and that irritation beneath his control sharpened into something more rigid, more defensive, as if doubling down could restore the order he believed he had. "Open it," he said, nodding toward the trunk, his voice firmer now, less patient, while Kevin shifted his stance again, no longer entirely relaxed, his eyes flicking between Danielle and the pickup as though trying to reconcile two stories unfolding at once. Danielle walked toward the rear of her car, each step steady, unhurried, the soft click of her shoes echoing faintly in the stillness. And when she reached the trunk, she rested her hand on the edge for just a second before lifting it, not because she hesitated, but because she was listening, measuring, timing. The trunk rose smoothly, revealing nothing out of the ordinary. A neatly organized space with a small suitcase, a folded jacket, a few everyday items that offered no explanation, no confirmation, no justification for the tension hanging in the air. Ryan stepped closer, leaning slightly to look inside, his brow tightening again as if the absence of anything suspicious only deepened his suspicion, because it did not match the narrative he had already constructed. Kevin remained where he was, his gaze drifting back toward the gray pickup, which had now rolled forward another foot, slow enough to seem accidental, deliberate enough to mean something else entirely. "You traveling somewhere?" Ryan asked without looking at Danielle, his voice quieter but more probing, like someone trying to force meaning into silence. "Just passing through," Danielle replied, her tone unchanged, calm, controlled, her eyes steady on him even as her awareness stretched beyond the moment, tracking the subtle shifts behind him. The pickup's headlights dimmed slightly, then returned to full brightness, a signal so small it could be dismissed as a glitch. But not by her. Not now. The air felt tighter, the space between seconds thinner, as if everything was beginning to converge. Ryan straightened, turning to face her fully again, his expression set. "Step away from the vehicle," he said, and this time there was no pretense of casual authority, only command, clear and direct. Danielle took a step back, then another, her hands visible, her posture composed, but there was a new tension beneath her calm now, something sharper, closer to the surface, because the timing was slipping, the balance shifting. Kevin finally spoke again, his voice lower, more uncertain than before. "Ryan, that truck." But he did not finish the sentence, because he did not yet have the words for what he was sensing, only the instinct that something did not fit. Ryan followed his glance again, longer this time, his focus lingering on the pickup as it idled under the dim light, its presence no longer background, no longer ignorable, but still not fully understood. Danielle saw the hesitation in him now, the crack in his certainty, and she knew that moment mattered, that it was the space where control could either tighten or break. The hum of the engine across the lot grew slightly louder, or maybe everything else had simply gone quiet enough to make it stand out, and for a brief second, the entire scene felt suspended again, like the world holding its breath before a decision. Danielle inhaled slowly, the night air cool against her skin, her eyes fixed not on the officers now, but past them, toward the pickup, because she could feel it coming, the shift from waiting to action, the point where observation would no longer be enough. Ryan turned back toward her, his jaw set, his posture rigid again as if he had decided to reclaim control by force of will alone, unaware that the situation had already moved beyond him, beyond routine, beyond assumption, and into something neither he nor Kevin had been prepared to step into. But Danielle had, long before the flashing lights ever cut through the quiet of the night. The tension tightened without warning, not loud, not explosive, but unmistakable, like a thread pulled too far, too fast, and suddenly everything in the space between them felt unstable. Ryan stepped closer again, his voice sharper now. "Turn around and place your hands where I can see them." And this time there was no room left for interpretation, only command layered over assumption, while Kevin shifted in behind Danielle, his presence closer than before, not touching, but narrowing the space, limiting movement, reinforcing control in a way that felt practiced and automatic. Danielle did not react with resistance, did not argue, did not rush. She simply turned slowly, her movements precise, her hands lifting slightly, visible, open, but her eyes were no longer on them. Her focus fixed past the flashing lights, past the patrol car, locked onto the gray pickup that had now begun to move with intent, rolling forward not in hesitation but in decision. The engine's hum deepened, no longer background noise but a clear signal that something was shifting beyond the officer's awareness. Ryan interpreted her calm as defiance, or worse, as something to correct, and his posture hardened further. "You are making this harder than it needs to be," he said, his tone controlled but edged with frustration, as if the lack of visible fear disrupted the outcome he expected. Kevin glanced again toward the pickup, this time longer, his instincts no longer dismissible. "Ryan," he started, his voice lower now, uncertain, but the word hung incomplete as he tried to understand what he was seeing. The pickup angled slightly toward the exit of the station, its headlights cutting a sharper path across the pavement, illuminating the edges of the scene in a cold, steady beam that did not belong to the rhythm of the flashing patrol lights. Danielle's breath slowed, not from fear but from focus, the kind that narrows the world down to essential pieces, seconds, choices, consequences. She knew the timing was gone, slipping beyond recovery, the window closing with every second spent under assumption instead of awareness. Ryan reached for his radio, his movements quick but still grounded in routine, unaware that routine no longer applied, that the moment had already outgrown it. "Dispatch, I have." He began, but he stopped mid-sentence as the pickup rolled forward another few feet, its motion now undeniable, no longer subtle, no longer ignorable. Kevin stepped sideways, his attention pulled fully toward it now, his body shifting instinctively. "That vehicle is leaving," he said, louder this time, the uncertainty in his voice replaced by urgency he did not fully understand. Ryan turned, finally committing his focus to the pickup, his control fracturing just enough to reveal the gap between what he thought was happening and what actually was. Danielle saw it all in that instant, the realization beginning to form in them. Too late, too slow, and the weight of that delay pressed against her chest, not as panic, but as clarity. She lowered her hands slightly, just enough to reclaim space, her voice calm but firm when she spoke. "You are watching the wrong person," she said, not raised, not urgent, but steady in a way that carried more weight than volume ever could. The pickup's tires rolled over the edge of the station lot, crossing that invisible line between waiting and departure, and for a brief second, everything aligned, the flashing lights, the hum of engines, the breath held in the air, and the realization that control had never been where they thought it was. Ryan's jaw tightened as he looked from the moving vehicle back to Danielle, the pieces not yet fully connected, but shifting, rearranging, forcing him to question the certainty he had walked into. This moment with Kevin took a step forward, his attention now fully on the pickup, his instincts finally catching up to reality. But the seconds lost could not be reclaimed, and the scene that had once seemed simple now revealed itself as something far more fragile, something already beginning to slip beyond their reach, while Danielle stood at the center of it, calm, composed, and fully aware that everything they had assumed had just cost them something they did not yet understand. The moment stretched thin and quiet, like the world itself had stepped back to see what would happen next, and for the first time since the flashing lights cut through the darkness, no one spoke. The hum of the gas station sign buzzed overhead, flickering in uneven pulses that painted shadows across Danielle's face, across Ryan's rigid stance, across Kevin's shifting uncertainty, and the air felt cooler now, heavier, as if something unseen had settled into the space between them. The gray pickup rolled slowly toward the edge of the lot, its movement no longer hidden, no longer subtle, but strangely calm, almost confident, like it knew no one would stop it in time. Danielle did not chase it with her eyes anymore. She did not move, did not raise her voice. She simply stood there, still and grounded, her hands lowering back to her sides as if the urgency had passed, or perhaps transformed into something deeper, something quieter. Ryan's radio crackled faintly in his hand, but he did not speak into it. Not yet. His focus caught between the woman in front of him and the vehicle slipping away behind him, his certainty unraveling in slow, uneven pieces. Kevin took another step toward the edge of the pavement, watching the pickup reach the road, his jaw tightening, his instincts now fully awake but arriving too late to matter, and he stopped, not because he chose to, but because something in him realized the moment to act had already passed. The pickup turned onto the road. Without haste, its taillights glowing red against the dark stretch of asphalt, and then it was gone, swallowed by distance, leaving behind nothing but the fading sound of its engine and the weight of what had just been lost. Silence followed, not empty, but full, dense with realization, with questions that had no immediate answers, with the quiet echo of decisions made seconds too late. Danielle inhaled slowly, the night air steady in her lungs, and for a brief moment, her eyes closed, not in frustration, not in defeat, but in acknowledgement, like someone marking the end of a chapter that had not gone the way it was supposed to. When she opened them again, her gaze was calm, steady, but different now, no longer observing from within the moment, but standing just outside it, as if she had already moved forward while everything else remained behind. Ryan finally lowered his radio slightly, his posture less certain. Now, less rigid, as if the structure he relied on had shifted beneath him, and he looked at Danielle again, really looked this time, not as a subject of suspicion, but as a piece of something he did not yet understand. Kevin turned back slowly, his eyes moving from the empty road to Danielle, his earlier confidence replaced by something quieter, something closer to doubt. The neon light flickered once more, casting a brief glow across all three of them, and in that flicker, the scene felt suspended again, but not with tension this time, with reflection, with the unspoken awareness that something important had just slipped through their hands, and that the person standing in front of them might have known it all along. Danielle did not explain, did not rush to fill the silence. She simply stood there, her presence steady, her composure intact, as if waiting for them to catch up to a truth that had been there from the beginning, hidden in plain sight, overlooked not because it was invisible, but because they had never thought to see it. Ryan's voice came slower this time, stripped of the sharp certainty it carried before. What was that? And the question hung in the air not as authority, but as something closer to doubt, to realization trying to take shape. Danielle did not answer immediately. She let the silence sit, let it settle into them, because some truths landed harder when they were not rushed, and when she finally spoke, her tone was calm, steady, but no longer neutral. "That was your priority," she said quietly, her eyes meeting his without challenge. without anger, just clarity. Kevin shifted his weight, his gaze dropping for a brief second before lifting again, as if replaying the last few minutes in his mind, trying to find the moment where everything could have gone differently. Ryan exhaled slowly, his grip on the radio loosening, the rigid edge in his posture softening just enough to reveal the uncertainty underneath. "You are saying we missed something," he said, not fully asking, not fully accepting, but no longer denying it either. Danielle stepped forward slightly, closing the distance not to confront, but to be heard, her presence grounded, deliberate. "You were looking for a problem," she said, her voice even, instead of recognizing one. And the words did not rise, did not accuse, they simply settled into the space between them, undeniable once spoken. The neon light flickered again, casting a brief glow across Ryan's face. And in that light, something shifted, something quiet but real, like a crack forming in a surface that had always felt solid. Kevin rubbed the back of his neck, his eyes drifting once more toward the empty road where the pickup had disappeared. And this time he did not look away quickly, because now he understood enough to know it mattered, enough to feel the weight of it. "Why did you not say something sooner?" he asked, his voice lower now, not defensive, but searching, trying to piece together what he had missed. Danielle held his gaze for a moment, then answered. "I tried," she said simply, and there was no emphasis, no need for explanation, because the truth of it was already present in everything that had just happened. Ryan's jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, but in recognition, in the slow acceptance that the control he believed he had was never complete, that his assumptions had shaped the moment more than the reality in front of him. The radio in his hand crackled again, a distant voice asking for status, routine continuing somewhere beyond this moment. But it sounded different now, smaller, less certain. Danielle reached into her jacket slowly, her movement deliberate, and for a brief second, both officers tensed instinctively, their training reacting before their understanding caught up. But she did not rush, did not break the calm that had settled over her. She pulled out a small, dark case, holding it steady in her hand, and when she opened it, the badge inside caught the flickering light, reflecting it in a sharp, unmistakable glint. Neither Ryan nor Kevin spoke, not at first, because the shift was immediate, undeniable, the kind that did not need explanation to be understood. Danielle's voice remained level, controlled, but now carried the quiet authority that had always been there. "Hidden beneath their assumptions, federal investigation," she said, each word clear, measured, "and you just compromised it." The silence that followed was heavier than before, not filled with tension, but with realization, with the weight of everything that had just changed in a single moment. Ryan stared at the badge, then at her, the pieces finally aligning, not comfortably, not easily, but completely, and the certainty he had carried into this night was gone, replaced by something far more difficult to hold on to, the understanding that he had misread not just a situation, but a person standing right in front of him all along. The badge remained in Danielle's hand, steady, unmoving, catching the uneven flicker of the gas station light as if it carried its own gravity. And for a moment neither Ryan nor Kevin reached for it. Neither questioned it, because the truth had already settled deeper than words. Ryan's shoulders dropped slightly, not in defeat, but in the quiet realization that the authority he had relied on was never meant to replace awareness. And now it felt thinner, less certain, like something borrowed, instead of owned. "We did not know," he said finally, his voice lower than before, stripped of the edge it once carried. But the words sounded incomplete even as he spoke them, because knowing had never been the only issue. Danielle closed the badge case with a soft click, the sound small but final, and slipped it back into her jacket without hurry, her composure unchanged, her presence still grounded in the same calm that had been there from the beginning. "You did not need to know who I was," she replied, her tone even, not accusatory, not raised, but clear in a way that left no room for deflection. "You just needed to see what was in front of you." Kevin let out a slow breath, his gaze dropping briefly to the pavement, then lifting again, his expression no longer guarded, no longer certain, but searching, trying to reconcile the version of the moment he had believed with the reality that had just unfolded. The red and blue lights from the patrol car continued to pulse across the scene, but they felt different now, less dominant, less defining, as if the control they symbolized had shifted quietly out of alignment. Ryan glanced toward the road where the pickup had disappeared, the empty stretch of asphalt reflecting nothing back, and the weight of that absence pressed into his chest, not dramatic, not overwhelming, but persistent, like a question that would not let go. "Is there anything we can do now?" Kevin asked, his voice careful, measured, as if unsure whether the question itself still held value. Danielle looked at him for a moment, really looked, and in that brief silence, the distance between them changed, not erased, but understood differently. "That moment has passed," she said, her words steady, not harsh, but firm in their finality. "What matters now is what you do the next time you stand in a situation that feels familiar but is not." Ryan's jaw tightened slightly, but not in resistance, in acknowledgement, because somewhere beneath the surface, he understood that this was not just about one missed opportunity. It was about a pattern, a way of seeing that had shaped more than just this night. Kevin nodded slowly, the movement small, almost unnoticeable, but real, as if something inside him had shifted just enough to take hold. The neon sign buzzed again overhead, casting its uneven light across all three of them, and the quiet of the station returned, not empty, but changed, carrying the residue of everything that had just unfolded. Danielle stepped back toward her car, her movements unhurried, controlled, as if the urgency that had driven the moment had already moved on without her, leaving only clarity behind. She paused for a second before opening the door, her hand resting lightly against the frame, and then she looked back at them, not with judgment, not with anger, but with a kind of calm that felt heavier than either. "Power is not what you think it is," she said softly, the words landing without force but settling deeply. "It is not control, it is awareness." Neither Ryan nor Kevin responded, not because they disagreed, but because the truth of it did not require an answer, only recognition. Danielle opened the door and slipped into the driver's seat, the interior light briefly illuminating her face before fading again as the door closed with a quiet, final sound, leaving the two officers standing under the flickering lights, no longer certain of the moment they thought they understood, and no longer able to ignore the weight of what they had just learned. The engine of Danielle's car came to life with a low, steady hum, blending into the quiet rhythm of the gas station as if it had always been part of it. And for a moment she did not move, her hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, her gaze forward, focused but calm, like someone who understood that not every ending needed to be rushed. Outside, the red and blue lights continued to pulse against the pavement, reflecting faintly off the side of her car, but they no longer held the same weight, no longer defined the moment the way they had just minutes ago. Ryan stood still, his radio hanging loosely at his side, his posture no longer rigid but unsettled, as if something inside him had shifted in a way he could not immediately correct. Kevin remained a few steps behind, his eyes moving between the empty road and the car in front of him, his expression quieter now, less certain, as if the world had revealed a layer he had never thought to look for before. Danielle eased her foot onto the brake, then slowly released it, the car rolling forward a few inches before stopping again, not out of hesitation, but out of intention, like a final pause to let the moment settle into place. The neon sign above flickered once more, casting a brief wash of light across the scene, and in that flicker, everything felt still, suspended between what had happened and what would come next. Ryan lifted his gaze slightly, watching the car, but not with suspicion anymore, with something closer to reflection, as if he was trying to hold on to a lesson that had not been spoken in full, but had been felt all the same. Kevin shifted his weight again, the movement small, almost imperceptible, but it carried the quiet acknowledgement that the situation they thought they understood had been something else entirely, something they had not been prepared to recognize. Danielle finally pressed the accelerator gently, the car moving forward, passing the patrol vehicle without hurry, without drama, just a smooth continuation of motion. And as she did, the reflection of the flashing lights slid across her windows and disappeared, leaving only the steady glow of the road ahead. Neither officer spoke as she drove past them, because there was nothing left to say that would change what had already been revealed. The sound of her engine faded gradually as she reached the edge of the station. Merging onto the road where the gray pickup had vanished minutes before, the distance between them stretching, but the connection to the moment remaining, carried forward in silence. Back under the flickering lights, Ryan slowly lifted his radio, but he did not speak into it right away, his thumb hovering over the button as if the act itself required more thought now than it ever had before. Kevin looked down briefly, then back up, his eyes tracing the empty space where Danielle's car had been, as if trying to understand how something so ordinary on the surface had held something so much. Deeper beneath it, the neon sign buzzed again, steady now, less erratic, casting a constant light over the quiet station, and in that stillness, the absence of urgency felt louder than any command had been. Ryan finally lowered the radio slightly, exhaling a breath he had not realized he was holding, and though nothing around him had physically changed, the way he stood within it had, subtly but undeniably. The road stretched out ahead, empty and dark, carrying away both the pickup and the woman who had seen it clearly from the beginning, leaving behind only the echo of a moment where control had been mistaken for awareness, and where silence had revealed more than authority ever could. And as the night settled back into its quiet rhythm, the only thing that remained was the understanding that some lessons do not arrive with noise or force, but with stillness, and once seen, they cannot be unseen.